the ship began slowly. A growing fascination with danger, a thrill in watching others get hurt, an unusual comfort with violence. Some teens feel anger, some feel fear. Antonio felt nothing, and that numbness, that emotional vacuum, was becoming a hunger. In late 2020, that hunger crossed a line. It started with a confrontation, fast, random, emotionless, a stranger on the street, a flash of violence, and then silence. No guilt, no panic, no fear, just the first step into a darkness he would return to again and again. Investigators later said the moment he killed the first time, he changed. Something inside him clicked into place. A switch was flipped, one he could never turn off again. Not much is known about Reyes' early life, and that's part of what makes this story so chilling. There were no long psychological reports, no childhood diagnoses, no history of violence in school, just a quiet teenager from Chicago who kept to himself, a boy who blended into background, but looked closely, and the warning signs were there. He didn't smile much, didn't show emotion, didn't react the way other kids did. Teachers described him as blank. Neighbors said he was polite but distant. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just a quiet, cold detachment. The kind of emotional emptiness that psychologists fear most, because sometimes the most dangerous people aren't the ones who explode. They're the ones who feel nothing at all. Chicago is a city familiar with danger, gunshots, sirens, headlines that never seem to stop. But in the years 2020 to 2021, a new kind of fear quietly slipped into its streets. A fear no one was prepared for, because the one creating it wasn't a man. He was a boy, 6 strangers, 6 different neighborhoods. No motive, no connection, just a cold pattern of death moving silently across the city. His name was Antonio Reyes, and he might be the youngest emerging serial killer in modern American history. This is the story of a teenager who felt nothing and took everything without hesitation. Police found no connection, no pattern in the victims, no motive they could understand. What they did find was something far more terrifying. Reyes didn't know a single one of them, not one. These weren't crimes of passion, they were crimes of emptiness. Prosecutors later described him as a teenager with no regard for human life, a boy whose emotional register never changed, before, during, or after each killing. Cold, flat, unmoved. Chicago had seen violence before, but this was different. This was a predator emerging in real time. The truth was far simpler and far more horrifying. There wasn't one. What finally broke the case was a single bullet casing, a casing that matched another killing, and another, and another. Detectives began mapping the incidents. 6 red dots scattered across Chicago like drops of blood. The pattern wasn't in the victims. The pattern was in the weapon, and that weapon belonged to a teenager. When police finally approached him, he didn't run, didn't argue, didn't react. He simply stared, as if the whole thing were a mundane inconvenience. A detective later said, it was like arresting a ghost, nothing in his eyes. In the courtroom, Antonio Reyes sat quietly, not angry, not sad, not scared, just blank. Prosecutors described him as unemotional, detached, and cold beyond his age. His face never shifted. As they listed the names timeline, the evidence, the families crying the gallery. Nothing. No remorse. No empathy. No reaction. For many, the most disturbing part of the entire case wasn't what he did. It was what he didn't feel. Psychologists call this early psychopathy, a rare but deeply dangerous condition, a mind wired without guilt, without fear, without emotional. He didn't come from the shadows. He didn't hide in abandoned buildings. He didn't wear a mask. He walked among us as a teenager with a quiet face and a silent mind, a reminder that sometimes the darkest predators aren't grown men with long histories. Sometimes they are children whose humanity fades before anyone notices. And perhaps the most terrifying truth is this: you can't always see evil coming, not when it's wearing the face of a boy.